So yesterday morning, the trailer, the first of probably two or three trailers for Sonic 3 was released. And to me, it definitely has got me, and if you look across all of social media, it's gotten a lot of people hyped up for the film. But I'm sure there's one question a lot of fans will have. And that question is, why isn't this movie a straight up adaptation, of Sonic Adventure 2? Like, it's gotten a lot of the elements, from the story incorporated into it, those kind of elements that we're familiar with, but why isn't it a straight up adaptation? Well, it's real simple. You see, just because it's based on something that is iconic, iconically associated, I should say, with a franchise like Sonic, like the SA story, it doesn't mean it has to be a straight up adaptation. I mean, even Sonic X didn't go, if you will. Sonic X did not even go for a straight up adaptation. I mean, if they did, it would have been Amy and not Chris Thorndike that talked sense into Shadow just like in the games. But instead, it was Chris. And there was a reason for that. One, because they had a scene planned out to where Chris would take some abuse. You don't want to see Amy take abuse at the hands of Shadow. Now, with that said, Shadow's origin stories have been told multiple times differently, outside of Sonic Adventure 2. They've been told differently in other versions of Sonic. Even Archie Sonic has told it differently. IDW, I'm sure, tells it differently. And, even other animated shows like Boom and Prime, tell it differently as well. I mean, you even have this anime short that's coming out that pretty much is going to tell it differently, if not similarly, but differently than what SA2 did. So basically, when you look at, Sonic 3, yeah, you're not going to get a straight up adaptation, beat for beat when it comes to Shadow's story, Sonic Adventure 2, if you will. You're not going to get a straight beat for beat, retelling. And the same goes for any, iconic story associated with an iconic franchise in the past. Most infamously, the Doomsday story with Superman. We all know how it originally went down in the comics. How they basically built up weekly, issue after issue after issue of Superman, Justice League, and so on to get to that iconic moment. But every time it's been adapted onto screen, whether it's animated or live action, it's not been the same story told identically as in the comics. When DC Animated decided to start doing their straight-to-video movies, the first movie they did was Doomsday. Was it a straight adaptation? No, it wasn't a straight adaptation. It was done differently and done in a way that made it iconic. It's like the first animated feature in the DC animated feature lineup. It made it iconic, and it also basically, I should say, lent itself to using elements of the story to make it its own. And then, of course, they repeated that almost a decade later with the death of Superman and the reign of the Superman. When they adapted those. Were those straight up adaptations of the original? No. I mean, yes, the death of Superman and the reign of Superman incorporated the Justice League, but not as they were seen in the comics. They were done differently. And the other thing is that this version takes place in what is known as the New 52 verse. So there's that. And then, of course, you look at, I think Lois and Clark did something similar. Within the last couple of seasons, they did a similar storyline or adaptation, very loosely adaptation. And then I think Superman and Lois, the one that's out right now and going into its final season, is going to do one similarly. So basically all these different, on-screen versions of Superman have done their different takes on the Doomsday story. I mean, I think even Superman the Animated Series and Justice League Unlimited did so, I think one of them anyway, did a similar story. I think even Smallville did one as well. So you've had different adaptations, some being very loose adaptations of this iconic storyline being done on screen. I mean, one of the more infamous, as of late, is Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. There's that. So basically, when a story itself, gets adapted or loosely adapted, or elements of that story are added into, a different story, kind of an original story that's kind of, based off, if not inspired by something, story-wise that's iconic, it doesn't mean they have to, it doesn't mean, they're not, following the story. It doesn't mean, that they're not, staying true, to what the story is about. They're just loosely, basing their story off of it, or they're adding elements from those stories to their own to make it its own. You kind of get what I'm saying? You get what I'm saying? For example, we got the MCU right now, right? We're going into the multiverse saga, okay? We all know that as we're going into the multiverse saga, there's going to be different stories that are adapted for it. Secret Wars is the big one coming up in 2027, I believe. You think they're going to follow that to a T? No, they're not. And what about Doomsday? You think they're going to base whatever story they base that off of? You think they're going to adapt whatever story that, from the comics, into Doomsday? You think they're going to do that to a T? No, of course not. They're going to do it in their own way, to where they're going to take elements, they're going to adapt certain story arcs or certain, character arcs and all that, place them into the movie and make it its own. They're going to basically give you a melting pot of goodness of some of the best elements and arcs within all the iconic stories in the Marvel comics. That's what they're going to do. And Secret Wars is a very iconic story in the Marvel comics, in the comic book industry, that, obviously is going to be adapted differently on the big screen. I mean, let's go to Spider-Man the Animated Series in the 1990s. They did what? A 4 or 5 part story arc? I think 4 parts, 4-part story arc adaptation of Secret Wars. Guess what? Was it true to the original? No, it wasn't. It only had a few characters, in there to kind of, basically fill the roles that were, basically, I guess you could say filled up originally in the comics. They didn't go full on, let's get every Marvel hero, let's get every Marvel villain. No. They only picked the ones that were, involved in Spider-Man, and that was it. Or at least associated in that manner. And also they basically, looked at the ones they could really use or felt were more iconic to put into that perspective, if you know what I mean. The point I'm getting at is, when you look at Sonic Adventure 3, Sonic the Hedgehog 3, I should say, yes, it is loosely adapted, from Sonic Adventure 2, but it's not a full adaptation. It's taking certain, elements from that story and adapting it to this original story. The same with Shadow the Hedgehog. They're taking certain elements from that and adapting it to the movie itself. And giving you a melting mixing pot of goodness, of something that will basically stay true to, who the characters are, who Shadow is, and maybe even give you more of a reason, to want to probably go back and play Sonic Adventure 2, go and play the new Sonic and Shadow Generations game, if you will. It's going to make you want to have more of a reason, or give you more of a reason to want to see more of this, or to really know more, you know. And they will be doing that not by straight up adapting, Sonic Adventure, Sonic Adventure 2. No, they're just, again, loosely adapting it, and you could see that. You could see that. And like I said earlier, Sonic X didn't do it directly. I think I said that earlier. I've been talking for a while, so I kind of, when you talk a lot, you kind of, forget if you said something earlier or something like that. But like I said earlier, and I'm sure I did. Sonic X didn't straight up adapt it, because instead of Amy in the Sonic X adaptation trying to talk sense in the shadow, it was Chris. And then you look at Archie Sonic, you look at IDW Sonic, Fleetway, I think, even adapted it. I mean, there are different adaptations that are not straight on. They're very loose. They take elements and they make it into its own conglomerate, if you know what I mean. So for anybody that's wondering, okay, why isn't this a straight up adaptation? It's because of the fact that they're trying to make it its own deal. They're trying to make it its own thing. I mean, like I said, Sonic Boom, Sonic Prime, they all did their own different takes when they would tell about the origin of Shadow. I mean, come on. You're at least getting some element of the original, but it's done differently. It's done in a way that, feels familiar, but feels fresh and new. I mean, again, going back to the Doomsday situation, yeah, a lot of the adaptations at times of, Doomsday showing up, a lot of the adaptations of him showing up would talk about, his origin being different, similar but different. The original, he's an escaped murderous alien. That's unstoppable, basically. Some, have him basically being frozen as an alien, I should say, but frozen in time, or buried beneath the earth and everything, like Superman Doomsday did. Some have him as a freaking, speaking of Superman Doomsday, they had him as a freaking robot, not an actual murderous alien. Another one. Again, going back to Superman v. Batman, Dawn of Justice, Superman v. Batman. He was created by Lex Luthor. And he was created using the DNA and all that from General Zod. You get what I'm saying? There are different takes of the Doomsday origin that, feel familiar, but are done in a way to make them feel fresh and new. It's not always the same thing. There's familiarity, but there's also a freshness and a newness that go along with it. And the same goes for the Shadow origin. There's a familiarity, that we all know about from, SA2, but there's also a freshness and a newness to it that we don't know about, that, kind of, takes us by surprise, but we appreciate in the end. So for anybody that's curious as to why it's not a straight up adaptation, my advice to you, go look at the numerous movies that have adapted certain storylines, for theatrical release. Go back and look at some of the live action and animated shows that have taken certain iconic storylines and adapted them for, prime time, if not daytime, Saturday morning showings. And you will see a familiarity, but also a freshness and a newness that makes it, makes that story, that adaptation, I should say, its own. Basically its own. It's kind of like the multiverse, situation. The multiverse thing is there's always that similar starting point, but then things go differently. And that's it. I mean, for example, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. In Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, there was a movie, that served as the TMNT 2K3 finale. And that basically pretty much confirmed, and Nickelodeon has followed up on it since purchasing the rights, has pretty much confirmed that there are different multiverse versions of the TMNT, but that all multiverse versions of the TMNT all have a similar beginning. A little different, but similar. You know, the turtles get mutated. Splinter gets mutated, sometimes as a, Hamato Yoshi into Splinter, or as a pet of Hamato Yoshi into who he is, and so on. So basically, there's always going to be that similarity, of the origin, but then you're going to have that difference that makes it fresh and new. You kind of see what I'm saying? You kind of get what I'm saying? The point I'm getting at, ladies and gentlemen, is when you look at Sonic 3, yes, it does loosely base itself and adapt itself from Sonic Adventure 2, but not entirely. It is done in a way to where basically it'll feel familiar, but also feel fresh and new to be its own. And I think that's what we have to really think about and consider. So, for anybody that's wondering, again, I advise, go look at what I mentioned, all those other, examples of franchises that have adapted story arcs and origins and made them, feel familiar but feel fresh and new to be their own. Check those out and you'll see exactly, why Sonic 3, is doing the same thing. And why it's going to really help it, I think, become a box office hit in the long run. But let me know what your thoughts are, guys. Comment below. Let me know your thoughts. Like the video. Ring the bell for notifications. Subscribe to the channel. It would help me out greatly. Also, check out the Teespring store. Link is in the description for merchandise you can't get anywhere else. I would very much appreciate that. Get yourself a t-shirt. Get yourself a mug. There are different items to purchase. It would be greatly appreciated if you could do that for me. Also, check out the links to where you can find my content elsewhere here on the internet. Also, there's a Venmo and a Cash App if you want to help donate in that way. Also, super thanks will be also open after the premiere of this video. So, guys, let me know what your thoughts are. I'd love to hear from each and every one of you. And until then, I am out.